and welcome to this meeting, which is being live streamed and Alec Lugadis will be zooming in. That's our GM infrastructure. So we'll begin with the karakia, and I'm going to invite members to actually do the karakia with me, which is the council karakia. On screen, here we go. Tuia Kirana, Tuia Karara, Tuia Karoto, Tuia Kawaho, Tuia Te Here Tangata, Karonga Te O, Karonga Te O, Haumure, Hurie, Tai Kie. Thank you. Right, this morning we have apologies from Councillors Mel Courtney and Councillor Rohan O'Neill-Stevenson, and I move that we receive and accept these apologies. Do I have a seconder?
Yes.
Rachel? Right, put the motion that we accept those. Aye. Carried. Thank you. The order of business is as per the agenda. Are you happy that we follow that, that order? Thank you. The next item on the agenda is members' interests. Are there any matters on the agenda which members may have a conflict? So no from me, no from Lindsay, no from the Mayor. Thank you. I note there's no public forum, and now we move to the confirmation of the minutes of the meeting of the Audit and Risk and Finance Committee held on the 24th of November. Are you happy that these reflect the minutes of the meeting? Moved by Councillor Rachel, seconded by Mayor Nick, seeing he was the only one that's present that was there. Thank you. And I move that these be accepted, confirmed. Aye. Thank you. All right. Are there any matters arising that is not on the agenda? Nope. Right. We'll now move therefore to the letter from Audit New Zealand on the annual report for the year ending 30th of June 2023, and I'll pass to Nikki.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll take the letter as read. There were a number of items raised by Audit New Zealand in relation to the audit, some of which I don't agree with and accept and have responded as such. I note that there are some misstatements quoted in relation to the revaluation process. As you will be aware, we were unhappy with our first valuation that we received and had it peer reviewed by choice because we wanted, we thought that the rates were too high. So, you know, from my perspective, they're not really misstatements. They were actually an adjustment that we wanted to find and take. So happy to take any questions on the letter and the responses that we're intending to provide to Audit New Zealand.
Relate to page 10 of their report on the very issue, Nikki, that you've just discussed. And its flow-through impact on rates is very significant. And that is with respect to, on page 25 of our agenda, 10 of their report, the $147 million increase in the valuation of our three waters infrastructure, a 22% increase. Now, my question is, could you just take me through, Nikki, that is that 147 million figure the final figure we got to after we reviewed it, or is that the figure that we landed to after you'd got additional valuation work done? The reason, and the other part I'm trying to tease out is there a difference of view between the council and the Auditor General about that number?
So through the chair, no, I mean, that was what we got the revaluation down to. It was still a significant number, but it was a higher than that to start with. And there is no debate. Audit were happy with our revised numbers.
So Audit's happy with the 147 million, the 22% increase in the value in a year. What was the original number?
It varied across, through the chair, varied across the different portfolios, but depending on stormwater, wastewater, water, they were a little bit different, but it was up around 30% from memory. 31%. It was really, through the chair, quite eye-watering. Even 22 is still a very high revaluation.
And could you just remind me, does the Auditor General then require a percentage rate of depreciation being funded off the back of that agreed 147 million figure? Is that the way that it then flows through?
So through the chair, I don't think it's necessarily a legal requirement that you fully fund depreciation, but obviously through the long-term plan process, we have considered, we've balanced up what is affordable and what is realistic for our ratepayers to fund of that revaluation. And as you'll be so there is no requirement that you have to fully fund depreciation.
And there have been periods when we haven't.
And there are periods where so we're fully funding the depreciation on a core asset portfolio, but where these revaluations have hit, we are phasing in that fully funding depreciation on that portion of it.
The reason I'm interested in this is I think we have got quite a substantive challenge with our community in communicating the scale of these increases, the efforts that we've gone to as a finance team to get those numbers back a bit, but still the degree to which that is having a huge impact on the rates that we are having to charge. And it's a complicated story, but just wanted to get clear on it so I can help in that communication exercise. That was my only question. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that I had sent through some questions which were answered by Nikki, and I'm comfortable with those. And then just to kind of acknowledge really the management comments through the audit document. They're really helpful, so thank you for those. It's really great. It's great to get that context and your response. And I remember recently getting the audit from another organisation that I'm on the board of, and there weren't management comments. And I was like, I'm used to management comments. Can you give us some context? So it was really, really great to see those. It's really helpful. So thanks.
Observation, Madam Chair, it's the same one really. I also would like to acknowledge the way in which the management responses have been handled. There's a nice mix of pushback, pragmatism, but acknowledgement of risk where it needs to be handled. I have a question in relation to the conflicts of interest or the interest register, but I might hold that for when we deal with the internal audit report, which covers some of the same matters. You might have noted, I think, that the external auditor identified a number of areas where councillors hadn't fully disclosed their interests. I just got a question for staff when we come to the internal audit as to what we do internally about that. But it can wait until I think about page 147.
This one is when we have recommendations for audit returns which the council's officials do not agree with. How do we actually get them closed? Because there are some open recommendations there that just kind of like we're in no man's land. How do we close that off? So that's my first question. And my second question relates to a materiality question, and that is the results 71% was paid in a year. And I guess as an accountant myself, the question is what does that do for the credibility of the profession when a matter is so trivial, it's clearly explained, lands. So first question that is open recommendation, closed. The second question is materiality the recommendations coming through the committee, such as this, which might bring in mind.
So through the chair, that's a very good question. I mean, I personally, when I will be sending this back to the auditor, I would actually like some of those matters removed because actually they're not relevant. For example, we can quite easily explain why that $17 was paid because of the way the number of days in a pay period works. And it should not be on an audit letter, I agree. And also there was another matter that was raised around delegations where it was quite clear that we have the processes and controls in place around, temporary increase in delegations when people are away on leave. That's just, so I would actually like those, I will be speaking to the auditor about actually removing those from the final letter. And then obviously the matters where I do believe there is an action on our part will sit there and we'll monitor them and work on them for the year-end final.
Correct. So page 45, for example, I note that a matter first raised in 2021 is the comment is not implemented, and the kind of issue as well, is this going to be there forever? And I just don't think that works for anybody and should actually be, you should try to remove it. But so those were my observations and comments. Are there any other matters for discussion?
Madam Chair, I wonder whether we should endorse that approach as a committee to strengthen Nikki's arm in responding to the management letter, the audit letter.
Yes.
I don't know that it's a resolution necessary, but maybe the minute could just record that the committee heard what the manager's approach was and endorsed it.
I think that's extremely sensible. That the committee itself it's the committee that has made these comments for audit, as opposed to yourself. So that would be, I think, useful. Are there any other matters in relation to the letter from Audit New Zealand on the annual report? No. Okay. So the recommendation is that we receive the report letter and we note Audit New Zealand's comments and how officers intend to address the issues. And just as an aside, note the comments from the committee, which we would like fed back to Audit New Zealand. So I'm looking for somebody to move that recommendation. And seconder, Lindsay, all those in favour? Aye, carried. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda then is the draft Treasury Management Policy, which is a detailed policy which has been, I can tell you, reviewed in detail by members of the committee, and officials have already received some feedback that relates to wordsmithing of the document to improve how it actually reads. I know that the officials have gone back to councillors in relation to those, and my recommendation is that given that they do not go to the policy components, but rather the way in which words are expressed, we accept those as for the officials to actually deal to. However, there are a couple of matters which I know Councillor Rachel wishes to raise, so I'll now open it up for questions, and maybe you can start, Councillor Rachel.
Thanks very much, Catherine, through the chair. Yeah, I sent through a number of some questions and then a number of suggestions in regards to the forestry section in particular. I think that it's my understanding that most of those have been accepted. Is that correct? Yes. So there's probably just a couple of areas which I wanted to seek clarification. And one of those is In relation to page 90, 33.7, how the investment is managed.
We just pause while we find page
Sure.
90, 33.7,
7, it's
how the investment is managed. Okay, I'm with you. You with us?
So it's for the commercial forestry that's retained, has the wording and harvesting at the appropriate time to maximise returns. So I just suggested that we add in, and in accordance with the recommendations of the Right Tree, Right Place Task Force and governance resolutions and guidance. I think it's really important that that is included in there, because there is the possibility that the wording of the Treasury Management Policy as it stands without that addition could actually override the recommendations from the task force, because the kind of life cycle of a pine forest is about 30 years, but the task force has actually made recommendations that some be removed sooner than that. So I think that, some may be actively poisoned and felled to waste. There are some that are not profitable to remove at all. And so if we're going to maximise returns, we would actually not remove them, but they are in locations like above the Boys' College, where the task force has recommended some action is actually necessary, even if it is at a cost. So I just thought that it's important to emphasise that the commercial forestry operations going forward are kind of going to be in alignment with the recommendations of the Right Tree, Right Place Task Force and government resolutions and guidance.
So is there any comment?
Just from my perspective, the wording that Rachel used at the end was a bit different to the beginning, and I support the latter wording, and that was the reference should be to council resolutions on the task force report rather than the task force, because the task force is a non-decision making body. It's the council that's made the decisions. So the reference on page 90 under 33.7 should be that the harvesting at the appropriate time to maximise returns in line with the council's resolutions on the forestry task force, on the Right Tree, Right Place task force. So the policy should reference the council decisions rather than the task force's recommendations.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that, but maybe instead of us kind of trying to wordsmith it on the fly, officers could go away and work out something that
I'm comfortable with where we're landing.
Yeah, and I think that's I'm comfortable with that as well. And there was just one other item that. So page 89. I think I'm probably comfortable with the rest of it.
You're okay with page 89?
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you.
I mean, my understanding is that pretty much everything else has been accepted. So,
Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks to staff. Thanks, Nikki, for your responses. It was really helpful.
Thank you.
Alec. They're on the screen.
Oh, thanks, Alec.
Okay. Nina, do you have any comments? Nope. Lindsay, no comments? Wow. So, sorry, Councillor Rachel.
Yeah, I just did have one. I think it is. I raised it it was earlier. It was under the investment, page 82, the investment policy 28.0, and I thought it was worth a discussion. So currently, the commercial forestry sits in the Treasury Management Policy as an investment. However, looking at the criteria for what comprises an investment, I'm not sure that the commercial forestry operation as it currently stands would meet those criteria. And so I'm just wondering, at what point during this transition will commercial forestry just be removed from the Treasury Management policy. Not that, we're going to have it for a long time, but council has a lot of assets with, that generate cost and revenue that don't sit in the Treasury management policy. And because it doesn't pay a dividend as the other investments do, like Nelmac, the port, the airport, already it's a little bit of an anomaly. So I just would like to understand at what point will we be removing commercial forestry from the Treasury management policy, because it will be managed as a whole, as part of all of the parks and reserves.
So through the chair, there are other investments that we hold that don't pay dividends, that like property investments that are captured within the Treasury management policy. And I think it is a good question, and it is something that we need to consider going forward. But officers thought that given we're in a transition period, and it has been in the Treasury management policy for right or for wrong, that this wasn't the time to just completely remove it, because it's signalling a change in direction as well. And I think it's important to get the whole context in there. And I think the way that we've landed with the wording is really helpful, and that it's giving the community the context of how we're moving away from commercial forestry. But I agree that probably next time we come up for a review, which would typically be on a 3-year period, unless we made a major decision in the meantime. So we typically would review this in line with the long-term plan process, so that it's a supporting information. It doesn't need to be consulted on, but it sits there behind our long-term plan. So I think it would be something that we would reconsider at the next LTP, if there's no trigger in the meantime.
Yeah.
And if I may, through the chair, it's important we don't get ahead of ourselves. We are consulting in this LTP on the decisions of council and the proposal, which I fully support, and hope we go in that direction, but we are consulting the public on that, and we shouldn't get ahead of ourselves in making any decisions at this stage until we've had that feedback from the public.
Thanks very much. I agree with that position as well, that we can't remove it yet because we haven't yet consulted with the community, but I just thought it was something for us to consider. And would it be, can we maybe note in the minutes that the forestry being included in whether forestry is included in the TMP or not going forwards will be reconsidered, or will that just staff will just do that?
I think we're alive to that. I think you make a really good point, Rachel. I don't think we need a resolution or anything like that.
Okay, thanks.
Lindsay, any questions? Okay. There being no further questions, the recommendation is that we receive this report and its attachments, and that we recommend to council that the council adopt the Treasury management policy, noting that there will be some minor changes to the wording that just tidies up the document in essence. So that's moved by Councillor Rachel, seconded by Mayor Nick. All those in favour? Aye. Carried. Thank you. We now move to the quarterly financial report.
Thank you. I will take the report as read. This is the half-yearly report up to the end of December. There we are running a larger deficit than expected, and I've actually provided an additional table in the report, which it does highlight, it sort of splits things into controllable and non-controllable. So a lot of the variance really is sitting within the grants and timing of grants and subsidies. Depreciation, as we discussed earlier, is higher because of that revaluation. And the development and financial contributions are sort of sitting below, and that is a number that we never get completely accurate because it depends on the timing of the subdivisions. So I'm happy to take any questions, and the only other thing I would highlight is we've been working on the project health attachment. There's been a request from the committee previously to provide more detail. And I very much would like to highlight that this is a work in progress, and I'm happy to take any feedback. There's additional comments included in that attachment where projects are not, where projects actually have a red project health column, then we are actually commenting and providing a bit more detail. But we will continue to work on this to meet what the committee would like to have oversight of. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Lindsay?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. We've got a couple of questions, Nikki, and the first one relates to the transport performance measure, a safe road network. And I know whether it's for you or for Alec, but it's a question that relates to the future more than to this report. I guess the concern that I've got, and we've discussed performance measures before and the need for them to be few in number and sharply focused. The issue I've got with this one is that the measure requires us to report on some attributes which are outside of the council's control. And I'm not sure whether the performance measure is written this way because it's an obligation that we inherit as a consequence of the way our funding is arranged, or whether we've got discretion next time the performance measure is reviewed to focus it more sharply on the things we can influence, like road condition and road design, as opposed to drug-induced crazy driving behaviour. So just some observations, if you could share them really about the status of the measure and whether or not we do have the flexibility to rethink it. Madam Chair.
I think it might be helpful for Alec to speak to this. And he's back on the screen. Alec.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you through the chair. That's a very good question. Can I just ask you, can everybody hear me? I seem to be
Yep.
I'm out in Stoke, and for some unknown reason, my picture's holding up. But can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Cool. So thank you through the chair. I think that's a very, very good question. So I'll answer the first question. There are some standard key performance measures that we have to report as a result of the Department of Internal Affairs, the DIA. They relate specifically to the three waters, and most of the three waters reporting is a requirement of the DIA. I do agree that some of our KPIs, we have too many, and as a result, as part of the upcoming LTP, we have streamlined those substantially to reflect a better understanding of the world and to report on things that are key. So there have been reductions and a greater focus. So I can say that we have given thought to that, and that has been addressed. In terms of, as I said, the DIA, and for example, deaths and serious injuries is something that we have to report on. Yes, that is not entirely within our control, and obviously the way we give effect to that is through the GPS and the money and the central government direction and the money that we get from Waka Kotahi that influences what we can and can't do. But we are very, very aware that some of those things are entirely out of our hands, but nonetheless we have to report on them. But we have given due consideration in the next LTP in terms of narrowing those down quite substantially. But this reporting still falls under the previous LTP, and we are obliged to report those based on what we said we would do through the last LTP.
Nick, and then I'll come to you, Rachel.
I've got three areas of questioning. The first of those is one for both Alec and Nikki, and that is where are we at with the funding from Waka Kotahi and emergency management on the refunds that we're eligible for as a consequence of the $90 million storm recovery costs that we've incurred. Now, there's been the government share, there has been some concern of delays in getting that money to flow through. And I'm just quite interested in, last year we were a bit behind on those payments coming through. I tried to read through here to get a window as to where that's at. Are those fundings coming through? My understanding is that there is standard subsidies. There are 3 components. There's the emergency management, there's whakakatahi for roading, and then my understanding is there's some other funds that we're eligible for in respect of stormwater, river works, those sorts of things. So can someone, either Nikki or Alec, give me an overview of, are we getting our dosh on time? When interest rates were 2 or 3%, it was not as significant. We're now paying a higher rate. The timing of getting these funds back does become a more significant item these days.
Alec, would you like to talk to that one, please?
Would I like to, or should I, Nikki?
No,
There's a difference between that. But yes, I'm happy to put up my hand. It's a very, very good question, Nick, and it's something that Nikki and I have an oversight on. I dare
Alec,
say.
Can you turn your camera
Will I
off,
be able to give you a definitive at my fingertips, but I will reporting that through the recovery task force, as well as through the. Is that better?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Start again, please, Alec. If you could start your response again, because you did break up, please.
Okay, cool. Sorry about that. So yes, Nikki, this is something that Nikki and I have a vested interest in, and we meet with staff on a regular basis to try and ascertain and keep ahead of all the different strains. I will be providing the recovery task force with a more detailed summary, and that will be reflected in the quarterly report that is coming to council in the near future. What I can say is that through the chair is that there are 3 strands essentially. The first one is NZTA Whakakatahi. The second one is through NEMA, and the third one is through our private insurances. Now, all of those are taking time, but the money is coming in. It is probably not coming in as fast as we would like, but it is a process that we need to follow, and we are dependent on information that they require, information that we require, a bit of discussion. They query a lot of things, and it is for us to make that case. I'm confident, excuse me, that the staff that we have on this, on the task, certainly Nikki and I make sure that this is a priority. I can say that the latest round with Whakakatahi is that we need to provide them some more information, which I have got staff working on, and I need to get that to Whakakatahi in the next 2 weeks. It's unfortunate that there has been a breakdown in communication in terms of them requiring that additional information. But such is life, and we are working closely with them. And the money is coming in, but it is fair to say that it's probably not coming in as fast as we would like. It is very, very complex. We're dealing with justifications. We're dealing with issues that are going backwards and forwards, being debated, having to go through potentially ministers with regards NEMA. But relationships are good along all aspects, but it is complex. I have always stated that our previous events, we've only really finalized final payments, when we go back to 2011 and 2013, where we've made big claims. I think from memory, those were only really resolved 5 to 6 years after the event. So this is a process. I do think that we're ahead of where we were on those previous events, but it is nonetheless slow, and we've just got to make sure that the paperwork is correct. And I have staff on that, as does Nikki.
Look forward to the report through the task force. I think the material difference is that if you are facing a 4 or 5 year delay, as you did in 2011, with it not being settled up, from what I'm hearing you, Alex, saying 2016 for the storm in 2011, if your interest rates at that point were 2 or 3%, it's not nearly as painful where now they're more 6 or 7. And so the importance of us just being hungry in resolving the technical issues and getting it. My second questions were also for you, Alec, and that was on page 103 of the report. It shows that on our capital expenditure, and the reason I'm directing it to you rather than Nikki is the bulk of the capital expenditure is yours, has us at December 23 quite a long way lower than the budget forecast. My question is, what level of confidence do you have of us meeting our target at the end of this financial year, June 24, of that full program? That is the total capital works is about 106 mil. What level of confidence do you have that we're going to get that level of capital works done, but that by my reading, we're about 20 million behind at the end of December?
That's a very good question, and I'll caveat that out saying that when we went into this financial year, I always indicated that this was going to be a big stretch, not just the capital works project budget, but also with the recovery. Am I confident that we'll spend the full amount? No, we never ever spend the full amount. And that's as a result of things that happen during the year. We have weather events, we have unforeseen circumstances, and it would be a very brave person to commit to spending all of it. I can say that there is a lot of work out on site. There's a lot of tenders out at the moment, especially with recovery. We've had to follow Waka Kotahi's procurement processes. Those do take time, but they are a partner. Work on Cable Bay has commenced. I will be signing off on the tender on the Mai Tai and the Glen within the next 2 weeks. So those works will begin. As I said, there's a lot of works happening, but I will never give 100% assurances that we will complete that full spend. We are still struggling in terms of our consultants, in terms of ability. They are still stretched. We are still stretched. We've had several, every time it rains, even moderately, some of our sites are affected. And we have another round of COVID. We have, at this moment in time, I've probably got about 5 or 6 staff off ill with COVID. And all of these add into the mix. We don't live in a perfect world, but as my commitment to you is always, we will give this our best shot. We have the processes in place and we are working as fast as we can. Thank you, through the chair.
My third and final question is for Nikki, and that's with respect to on page 105, we see that outstanding rates is at 925,000, which I note is the highest for the December quarter, I think on record. And I just would be keen to understand what it's an increase by my calculation of about 13% on same time last year, but 90% increase on pre-COVID. You note in the report that obviously households and businesses are under pressure financially. Are there any additional steps that we are taking to assist with our ratepayers that are behind, i.e. what's our credit management to making sure that the situation doesn't further blow out?
So through the chair, I'm confident that our rating officer is, he's very proactive in trying to get people onto payment plans. We are working with more ratepayers than we have historically. Obviously, the numbers are bigger because our rates are higher, and we've got a 2 or 3 quite sticky ones in there that you will be aware of that are not paying their rates at all, and are before the courts. So we are, trying, the best way to get people to pay their rates is to have a conversation with them. And so we are speaking to ratepayers directly.
Are you expecting us to increase our allowance for write-offs where people either go into bankruptcy or a company goes into liquidation and unable to pay its rates as a consequence of the general more difficult financial climate?
We don't write off rates through the chair.
What happens if a company goes broke and it owes rates, or a person goes bankrupt and they own rates? I noticed in the figures that have come out from MB that nationally we're seeing some increase in company liquidations and those. How does that translate into the council's finances?
So the reality of rates is that it's a charge against people's property. So
We're a secured creditor,
Yeah.
we never miss out.
through the chair, that's correct.
Well, I hadn't thought of that aspect of the business. There are some good things in being a council.
Through the chair, and that's why councils have such a high credit rating.
Thank you. That's all my questions.
Councillor Rachel.
Thanks so much, Catherine, through the chair. So I've just got 3 questions on the quarterly finance report. Or the first one was a comment. Page 101, 4.13 personnel costs. I appreciate the way this was framed. I thought it was really useful for us to have our attention drawn to this. That council, what I take from it is that council has a work program to deliver. And if we are short-staffed, we still have to deliver that. So there isn't really kind of economies of scale to be achieved by axing a whole lot of roles within the organisation. So I thought that was a really useful thing for governance to take note of.
And if I may, I just wouldn't mind giving my perspective on that. And look, I've given a lot of attention to this one. Ever since I've been in the role, we've been blowing out on personnel costs, and SLT are looking at it closely, and it's a really difficult juggling act. Because we've got a lot to do, and that's part of the right sizing of the organisation and the transformation we're going to do. We want to get this back into balance, but until we do that, if we're going to continue to support the citizens of Nelson, we need to do what the team are doing in this space. So I'm confident it's about the right level, but I want to assure the Audit and Risk Committee that we're not ignoring this, and it's got serious management attachment to it.
Thanks. Page 102, the profit and loss by activity. I guess I reflect that this term we no longer have a forestry subcommittee, so there's no oversight at a governance level of the financial position of the forestry activity. And so I was just wondering really where this is represented in the summary table, and whether it would be appropriate to have some kind of quarterly update on forestry activity to this committee, or whether that would come through. I think we're getting 6 monthly updates from different pillars within council. So where would we be getting a financial update on the forestry? Which, and is it more appropriate to be here? Because this is really, we have, I guess, we need to have, undertake our due diligence in regards to the financial health of various activities.
I'll let my experts speak, but we are transitioning away from commercial forestry, so that focus of that update we've probably not been focusing on. Absolutely, Alec will be bringing a report in March, and that potentially could be right. Whether Alec was going to include that into his report, I don't know. I might be able to talk to that, but as we're transitioning, I think that focus on the commercial aspect, profit and loss in forestry is. And I've got to correct myself here. Of course, we're still consulting on this with the public if we go down that route, but on the assumption that we do. Alex, is there anything you particularly want to raise on that?
Thank you. Through the chair, yes. Look, we are still consulting. What you've said is correct, but I do have a section, and I will be reporting through the 6 monthly report. There will be a section on forestry. in that report, yes, I do intend to report it because that is the oversight on all aspects that currently fall under infrastructure. So there will be some commentary around that, yes.
Thanks very much, Alec. And I am assuming that the forestry managers are still providing the quarterly or 6-monthly financial reports through to council. Is that and that is something that elected members could request to view?
Through the chair, yes, they are still. It's still business. It's still business as usual for us. So PF Olsen still provide us with that, and yep, that is a public document which we normally reported through the forestry committee, and happy to make that available to councillors. Yes.
Thanks very much. And my final question, page 111, transport a safe road network row. So it's the first row on that table. I just noted the commentary around the incidents of fatalities and serious injuries, and that we are on track to have a higher number of those than previous years. And I was wondering whether we had any data on how many cyclists and pedestrians were represented in that data?
Through the chair, yes, I can answer that. If you can just bear with me, I've got one screen here and I'm trying to talk between multiple things. So I can advise that in the 21-22 financial year, we had 3 cycle events, 0 pedestrian. In the 2022-23 financial year, we had 3 pedestrian and 3 cycle events. And in 23-24, 1 pedestrian and 4 cycle events.
And by events, those are fatalities or serious injuries?
Correct. They are DSIs, death or serious injuries.
Yeah,
yes.
okay. Thanks very much. Yeah. Do you think there's relevance in actually breaking that out in that row? Because it may influence how the governance table considers investment into our roading and active transport infrastructure.
Through the chair, we can break that up. We can go to any level that the committee deems that it requires, and if that's the level, then we can certainly provide that information. Yep.
Thanks.
Just
a
supplementary question on that. It is concerning if we have had, as per the report, 8, and my assumption is that is the comparison, and we're only 6 months through the year. Is that correct? Am I reading the figures correctly in that table?
Correct, and I think that's why we're showing it as a red and not on track, because we are on track.
Well above for 6 months, only 6 months into the year. The correct place.
It's not an on track we want to be on track with, but it's
yeah, and I understand that.
Than we
I think it's good that it's highlighted in this report. I think the right place for the broader discussion is the Joint Regional Transport Committee rather than Finance, Audit and Risk. This is the place to highlight it, and that's the mechanism, in my view, for us to get into it. I do think, Alec, if those numbers continue to be at that point, it would be worthwhile actually producing a bit of a supplementary report for councillors around what were the accidents, is there any rationale? Having watched transport accident data, sometimes you can just get unfortunate, unexplainable blips. Sometimes actually there are some underlying things that the governance team need to be aware of. And so just a flag, Alec, would be if those poor numbers continue, I think it would be worthwhile your transport team preparing a report both for the Regional Transport Committee and for all councillors.
I have a further supplementary in relation to this. I see the performance measure relates to the local road network. So I presume that the reporting is local road network only. I guess the public is not aware generally the difference between the state highway network and the local road network.
Sorry, through the chair, I just wonder, have you got your mic on?
No, I'll ask the question again. So I note the performance measure relates to the local road network, and I presume that the reporting is on the local road network. I just make the observation that the public are generally unaware of the difference between a local road network and the state highway network, and indeed the interface between the two, particularly at intersections and the like. So it's really an interesting question about how you actually report on both, because it will be in the public's mind. The public don't know the difference. So can you just comment on that, Alec?
I can, through the chair. We only report on our roads. We don't report on any aspect related to Waka Kotahi, and nor should we.
Right, fair enough. Okay, thank you. But back to the point that, sorry to keep on about it, but back to the point that Lindsay made right at the beginning in relation to how this performance measure is described. I think the key question he asked is, should the performance measure reflect what the local council through its roading network has control of, as opposed to, I think the question was, somebody was driving drunk on our local road. It was a human factor as opposed to something which we controlled. So do you have any comment on that?
I think that through the chair, that goes through to my next question as well. Look, we base all our information on incidents that get reported through the CAS system, which is a system that's monitored by the police and Waka Kotahi NZTA. We do have insight in terms of whether that was a rainy day, whether there was alcohol, whether it was tired, fatigue. So I can provide those details. And yes, some of them are purely human error, unfortunately, speed, alcohol, and a whole range of other things, wet conditions. So we do have that, but I do need to say that there's we can only base it on a formal the CAS database that we all use. But I can certainly, and I think that leads to Councillor Sanson and Mendick's question, just maybe expanding on that a wee bit in the KPI key performance measure outcomes. Yeah, we can.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any other questions from the group? Can I just take you, please, to your lovely new report on page 120, your new project health summary, and provide you with a little bit of feedback which would help improve the report. So I'm really interested in the complete and in defects period and how that's reported. So if I take you to the Maitai Hub Bridge, what you're telling me is you've spent 90% of the budget and it's complete. So I read that that has come in on time and under budget. Is that a fair assumption?
It's a very, very good question, and I think we're probably overcomplicating things in terms of that defect. So the way a contract works is that, so just to answer your first question, that job was completed on time and within budget, yes. There are two aspects from an engineering point of view is when we issue practical completion to the contractor, and that is a closing off the paperwork that's saying you delivered everything in terms of the contract, and that we will now release bonds, we will release retentions, There is a defects liability. It depends on the nature of the job. Sometimes it's 3 months, sometimes it's 6 months, sometimes it's 12 months.
Right.
We hold bonds and or cash, which we will only release at the end of those defects liability periods. So
Right.
strictly speaking, I think for all intents and purposes, what we should potentially, if I may make a suggestion, to report on is whether it's just complete and whether practical completion
Yes.
has been issued. It's a minor issue in terms of when we release those other funds.
Yeah.
And that's a standard contractual requirement that we just hold everybody responsible and we see how things maintain. But to clarify, there's a practical completion, there's a defects liability period, and strictly speaking, 90%, 99% of all bonds retentions are by way of bonds these days as opposed to cash. But I think that's probably just complicating the thing. So for all intents and purposes, we should just reporting on when a project is complete and it can be used, for example, the bridge.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thanks. I mean, it's really helpful. I mean, it's really great. So the Awatea Place sewer pump station, which you also showing is complete, you're showing that you didn't spend any money on that. I guess, I hope, I mean, it's either, is it just an error, Alec? See the $174,996 and then you've got percentage spent, 0, and you're telling me it's complete.
Yes. Yes, that's the same thing. We still have outstanding invoices to give as part of the defects, and that's why I think it's complicated. I think for all intents and purposes, the best reporting mechanism will be to report that the job is complete, and the Awatea pump station has been successfully completed. Yes. Brilliant.
And just another observation, I thank you for reporting more detail on the REDs. I think that in relation to the St Vincent Street, Toy Street raised roundabout, you're highlighting that as an orange. And I guess maybe just an explanation as to an estimate going forward as to what you think it might cost would be helpful. So it's just, I like the summary. I think it's really useful. And it's just really where there are exceptions that maybe it would help the committee if you just provided a little more comment. But great to see it. Thank you.
Okay, and so noted. And yes, I think wherever we're logging something as anything other than green, I think we should be putting in a comment. So I take that on board, yes.
Great. So thank you for doing that. I think we feel confident that we know that we're receiving information that's helpful to the committee. Are there any other questions in relation to the quarterly finance report? The recommendation, Councillor Rachel.
I'm just happy to move it.
Right. So the recommendation is that we receive the report. That's been moved by Councillor Rachel, seconded by Lindsay. All those in favour, please say aye. Carried. Thank you very much. We now move to the quarterly risk report, and Chris.
Through the chair, I take the report as read.
Hi. Are there any questions for Chris in relation to this report? Councillor Rachel.
Thanks, Catherine, through the chair. Kia ora, Chris. Thanks for the report. I sent through a question, page 149, item 5, officer delegation compliance. Regarding the breaches of financial delegated authority, do we have a breakdown of what staffing tier this has been happening at?
So through the chair, that was managers and people with no assigning delegation.
Sorry, can you just repeat that? I didn't.
So through the chair, and the breaches were found with manager. So there's group manager, team leader, and then I guess general officer. So it was at manager level and people with no authority.
And what is being kind of proposed, I guess, for this going forwards?
So through the chair, there is a review of the delegation process and policy in general. So part of that we'll be looking at the delegation limits and communicating with the officers just what the expectations are. So rather than bring that communication forward, we're waiting just for the process of the update to the delegation policy to go ahead.
Can I just note, Councillor Rachel, that that's the internal audit report. We've jumped a report. So if we just note that, that's all right. We'll just take that slightly out of order, but that was a question relating to the next report. Okay. So that's all right. Are there any questions in relation to the quarterly risk report? I notice that there are the top 10 risks are identified there. And does anybody have any questions in relation to those? Perhaps this is a question for council from me in relation to central government-led reform. My expectation and my would be that this is high on your radar, that your response to the constantly changing environment continues to be a challenge, but you've got it. You're working on it. Nick?
One of the biggest risks that have worried me has been the council doing its long-term plan on the basis of the law, which was we lost the three waters, as compared with the stated policy. Now, in my view, the legal risk of that has been substantially reduced as a consequence of the assurances we got last year from government that the repeal legislation will be passed. And I noted this week, Parliament seems to be doing that. And from my perspective, that's a bit of a relief.
Yes.
In the sense that it was putting the staff in a very difficult position of, do we comply with the law or do we comply with political statements? I think there are a number of areas of other risk around reform, whether they be what comes next in respect of three waters, but also there's a whole number of programs of work covering transport and others where we are yet to get a clear steer from central government as to their direction. And so it's just an area where we've just got to be nimble-footed and keep ourselves as well connected as possible with their policy development.
Thank you.
I'm the owner of this risk, so I should probably talk to it.
Yes.
Look, obviously the risk is high, but I'd say it was on the lower end of high. I think we've got a good relationship with the newly forming government. Both Nick and I have been up to see ministers. I'm relatively relaxed around the three waters, as it was known, or new waters done well, whatever it's going to be called in the future. But I think we're in a good position as a council compared to many other councils in terms of what previous council has done over the last decade. We're in a good space in the three water space, and wherever we take it in terms of a CCO and whatever partnership that goes forward, I'm comfortable that we sit well, and Nikki's done an exceptional job to think about that through the LTP. The other reforms, the RMA reform, local government reform, of course, all a concern, but I think we're well connected. I don't think from the audit and risk perspective, there's too much risk for our council.
Thank you. Are there any other questions in relation to the risk report? Not from council. Okay. All right. The recommendation is that the Audit, Risk and Finance Committee receives the quarterly risk report to 1st of December 2023 and its attachments. Moved Councillor Rachel, seconded me and Nick. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Carried. Right, now we'll move to your internal audit report. And Chris, you're still in the hot seat. Right, are there any questions for Chris other than Councillor Rachel's question, which has been asked already?
So through the chair, there was an additional question that I received earlier with regards to the councillors' or members' interests and how that is monitored.
Yes.
Would you like me to put that
Yes,
question on the
yes,
record?
please.
Thanks very much, Chris. So there were really two issues for me. One relates to your report and the completion recently of an annual audit, fraud, conflict of interest, centres of expenditure review, which tied back, at least in my mind, to a comment that was made by the auditor in the review of the annual report, where they noted, based on a scan of the public domain information, they observed that 10 interests weren't disclosed by councillors. And the management response to that was, well, some of those undisclosed interests are no longer councillors' interests, or they're no longer councillors. I wasn't quite sure how to read that. So that led me to pose the question, to what extent do we use public domain information to test the declarations that councillors have made as part of our internal audit process?
So through the chair, there's two sort of separate processes. So for employees, that I go through that process as part of my internal audit check. For members, there's a slightly different process that's run through the governance advisor and finance team. The major difference being that for members, we look at people's legal names and their partners' names in order to do those checks of the charities office and companies office websites. And for the members, I believe it's 6 monthly. So we do those checks. I'm not entirely sure of the Audit New Zealand findings, but there is some transitioning when new members are elected, and that they sometimes can take a little while to put all their declarations together. And at the same time, those people who are no longer members, those get taken down. What I can say is there's a public version of members' interest, and then there's the organisational private version, which has got all those extra details. So we do look into it a lot deeper than just what the public version is.
Thanks, Chair. Perhaps a supplementary observation, more than a question, but I'm keen to know how you might treat this. But in another context, I've learned that an interest doesn't extinguish when the membership of the entity ends. So how do we deal within our register with the situation where the perception of bias or a conflict could still arise or still be raised, notwithstanding the fact that a membership of an organisation has terminated?
So through the chair, I can sort of speak to how we look at it from employees rather than a members' perspective. So, for instance, some of our employees used to work at contractors or have resigned and are planning to move to contractors that we engage. So we leave a sufficient amount of time that we acknowledge, and we're still managing that. But say, for instance, where someone has come from a contractor and now is an employee, that's initially there's a higher risk, but as the time goes on, that is less important. So whether we recognise that or sort of drop it down as a less important. So we on a case-by-case example, case-by-case situation. Hopefully that answers your question.
Can I just check with Lindsay that this is a really important area of managing conflicts of interest, and certainly from the governance table, I've actually been really pleased with the way in which councillors have very openly declared interest. Some of them, in my view, quite periphery, but rightly erring on the side of caution at individual council meetings when things have come up. Could I just check in, because from the governance end and the councillors want to ensure that we are doing the very best in this area. Lindsay, have you got some concern from the elected member side of the declaring of interests?
Thanks. Nick, through you, only the observation that the auditors made that there was some stuff in the public record that wasn't on the council's record. I read the explanation, which gave rise to the subsequent question to Chris: how do we handle interests that might endure beyond the membership of an entity? And in another organisation that I'm involved with, the way they do it is they leave the interest on the register with an expiry date or a termination date of the membership, but it sits there for the term of office.
Yeah, quite relaxed about how we resolve that. The bit that I would want both the chief executive to be aware of and yourself as the auditor is that I would expect any issues that have been raised around elected member conflicts of interest to be drawn to my attention, because I want to run a best practice in this area. More often it may be a oversight, and I've certainly seen nothing from any of our elected members that would indicate anything other than fully understanding the requirement to disclose. But can I just raise if there are issues with elected members, that they be brought to my attention at the earliest possible occasion so that it can be corrected and put right. There's the separate issue that Lindsay raises, and that is, the how long after you leave an organisation do your conflicts run out? And I think that's a more difficult question, in the sense that, for instance, if you take myself, having held 14 different ministerial portfolios, I still have a close relationship with many in the Department of Conservation and projects that I was still involved with. I prefer to have in this area a black and white test. Either you're in or you're out. And would be happy for some further advice in that space on the issue that Lindsay has raised, but want us adopting best practice. So if there's the question of people previously being a member of a trust or previously being in a role in a company or other organisation, I'd be keen to know what best practice is and to make sure that what our council is doing best practice. But I prefer to have a black and white test rather than something that's vague. Otherwise, people get into the difficult position of not knowing what it is. So whether the rule is within 3 years or that it's significant, I don't know, but would prefer to have, if there is to be a change, an requirement for declaring previous interests that the rules are quite clear.
It's an interesting issue, isn't it? Because information obtained or that comes to you as a councillor, if you are no longer a councillor and you're out in business, when that's the interesting test, isn't it? And I don't know that there's a right answer, is there? I wouldn't think so.
The only bit I would say at local government level is Parliament is grappling with the issue of a member of Parliament resigns and then becomes a lobbyist.
Correct.
And even more so if they're a minister and then they become a lobbyist, they inherit a whole lot of information, and there's been significant controversy, particularly in Congress, in the US around that. My view is, in the United States context, it's a really big deal when they're dealing with trillions. With Parliament and ministers, they're dealing with billions. I'm not sure there is sufficient commercially sensitive information that if you're a council elected member, that you then move post-council career into a business interest that you are, that in practice, it's a big enough issue for us to sweat over too much. Maybe a bit more interesting if you're a staff member and then, as a consequence of your information, move into a position of contracting. So I'm quite happy to have the discussion, but would prefer to have nice, clear black and white rules and want Nelson City Council having best practice. And Lindsay, are you aware of any other organisations that have developed a sort of a black and white test about previous roles?
No, is the short answer. But can I add, I think that the issue that councils are likely to confront is less to do with commercial and personal conflicts, but more to do with bias and predetermination. So it's going to be that soft stuff, which is really, really hard to find, that the issues will arise.
Okay. So what outcome are you looking for from this discussion, Nick? Do you want work to be done by?
Well, the first thing I'd like to do is I would like to personally find out where are the areas where the audit has clipped us, because I want those drawn to my attention as quickly as possible and for me to raise it with the relevant elected members and to make sure it's tidy. That's step number one. Step number two is I would like the audit team to say what is best practice around the question that Lindsay has raised of previous involvement, and is there a need? And I think it's good Lindsay's asked the question, and I just want to say, well, okay, let's see, is there any guidance that we can give around that? Albeit my signal would be I'd prefer to have reasonably clear black and white rules rather than vague rules in this area, so that people are absolutely clear about what conflicts needed to be declared. So I suggest on Lindsay's question, there's a piece of further work to be done as to what is best practice around previous interests.
You happy with that? You can pick that up.
Yeah, we can pick that up, and I'm happy to explore that black and white. But I think the black and white can be quite tricky in this space, and I do think guidance to members around using knowledge, previous knowledge, and I from what I've seen in almost a year in the job, is that members have been really good at going forward. We've got both of you, sitting here have done that really well. I think my assessment is that this is not an area of worry for the council, but certainly we'll explore where we can, as best we can, the black and white. But my experience certainly is that it's quite difficult and it is nuanced.
With the elected members, there's two phases. One is making sure that the declared interests are absolutely accurate, and that's where it seems there's an issue. The second part is at the beginning of each council meeting, we have a specific item where people need to declare their interest rated items. The second part is working very well. I think there's a question mark that's come through the audit as to whether those interests are tidy, and I want to get that addressed as quickly as possible.
Thank you. All right, that's clear. Are there any other questions for Chris in relation to the internal audit? Well, I'll put the recommendation that we receive the quarterly internal audit report dated 31 December 2023. Moved Mayor Nick, seconded Councillor Rachel. All those in favour? Aye. Carried. Thank you. The next item of the agenda is a resolution to move into a confidential session, and the resolution is that we exclude the public from the following parts of the proceedings of this meeting. So moved by Councillor Rachel, seconded by Mayor Nick. That's carried by the committee. Thank you. We'll just pause now while the